What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the overall market moving forward as we have big data coming out for tomorrow and how things are looking in my personal opinion. But let me just mention that I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, and the offer ends very soon in just 1 week. Anyways, for Tesla, as you guys know, we saw earnings come out yesterday, and that led to this big sell-off in Tesla, especially because considering the fact that Tesla's profits ended up being the worst that we saw in 5 years, which is not the best of news for them. However, despite that, there was still a lot of very, very bullish stuff that came out as well for the long term. Tesla made big announcements about the robotaxi event, which should be happening on the 10th of October. Not to mention a lot of growth potential with AI, FSD, robotaxi, and also Optimus. So Optimus is going to be very, very big, at least for Tesla's revenue for the long term. And everything was very, very bullish for the long term. I'm very excited for what they're going to be announcing. But when it comes to the short term, revenue was a beat at $25.5 billion, but EPS was a miss. Not to mention the fact that their automotive gross margins were at about 14.6%, below the estimates of about 16.3%. So that's not the best of news for Tesla. And then you also have to consider the fact that as far as Tesla is going, there's a lot of uncertainty about the election when it comes to subsidies and tariffs. So all those things led to this sell-off in Tesla. But it wasn't just that. We saw a lot of big tech stocks also following this trend with the sell-off, and that's leading to a lot of very, very interesting stuff. So Tesla ended up sliding down. This played a big role in why the overall EV sector saw some downside, not to mention other shifts. However, there is good news. Tesla has more affordable EVs on track for the first half of 2025, and we still have the robotaxi events and such. So there was good stuff that came out from the reports, but also some stuff that wasn't as good for the short term. So with Tesla dipping, we're approaching a critical support right here at our 4-hour 200 EMA, which is at 212 right now. I think Tesla's going to test this as soon as tomorrow. And then we're going to be watching to see what kind of reaction the market gets to some big data. And that's going to determine if the market gets a bigger bounce or if we can kind of like gap up and then end up dropping. As of right now, SPY, ES, SPX, Tesla, all the charts are looking more bearish, and there is a good chance we see more downside later on. But for the super short term, as we open tomorrow, there's a good chance the market might try to rebound just a bit, so long as the data isn't too bad. So let's talk about this data. Let's talk about some important factors about the markets. Then I'll break down Tesla and the others. Tomorrow is going to be Thursday, July 25th, 2024. Please note that at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 hour before the market opens, we have the GDP numbers coming out for the GDP growth and GDP sales, not to mention initial jobless claims. This data is going to be very important, leading to some volatility. So we'll see what this causes. But GDP numbers will give us more insights on how the economy is looking. We have a 2 to 2.5% consensus to forecast. That's the range we have right now for GDP. Let's hope the numbers are decent, which helps the market rebound a little bit. If not, the market could end up dipping lower. So watch for that very carefully. And obviously, guys, I'm not really a fortune teller, so I don't know what the data will look like for sure. So just get ready for some high volatility 1 hour before the market opens and also going into open. Also, for Friday, we have the PCE data inflationary report. That's going to be very important too. So I'll talk more about that later on. But Thursday and Friday will be more heavy for data days. For earnings, there's not really much coming out for tomorrow, just like American Airlines and a few others. But just note that for today in the morning, we had AT&T. I talked about this already. AT&T did very well with subscriber growth and a nice beat on EPS and revenue. And then we also had IBM, which just announced earnings just now. Not looking too bad as well. Pretty good earnings from them. Tesla and Alphabet announced earnings yesterday. And don't forget that both of these stocks ended up dumping after earnings came out. Alphabet's revenue for the YouTube ad revenue was not as great. And then there's other factors that led to sell-offs for these stocks. So that's what fueled the market to actually sell off. IBM came out today, and this is actually looking decent. The shares are actually up. EPS was a beat at $2.43, and then revenues at $15.77 billion above expectations on both metrics, and their outlook is not too bad whatsoever. So that's why IBM is up in the after hours, outperforming the market. One more piece of news before I talk about some data for Tesla and start talking about the charts. So just know that right now, fear is making up the majority of sentiment. We're actually shifting. We're no longer greedy. Fear is now kicking in. And also, momentum is now back to neutral. So it used to be extremely greedy. It went down to greed. Now it's just at neutral. So we're seeing a big shift in sentiment right now. On top of this, the reason why the momentum is now down is because we're getting closer to the 125 daily moving average. That's the reason why the market is weakening. Now look at the 5-day average for puts and calls. Right now, the ratio is going up because there's more puts being bought. More sellers are starting to step in. So that's causing a big shift right now. Now the overall indicator is neutral. It used to be greedy, now it's back to neutral. And then momentum is also building for the VIX. The VIX is currently at extreme fear. We're starting to see fear building up, and we're seeing a big shift as well. For Tesla, we saw high volume selling at 165 million in volume. Short volume is also going up. It's currently at about 64%, so it's going up right now. Needham is giving Tesla a hold rating. Goldman Sachs gave them a neutral rating, and then GLJ Research and then Guggenheim are giving them sell ratings. So we're getting some negative ratings for Tesla, which will contribute to the sell-off. Price-price ratio is dipping because Tesla's losing some strength relative to the markets. And then historically, Thursdays are green only about 47% of the time. And then don't forget, there tends to be more volatility around 11 a.m. and then during the second to last hour of the day. So that's it for my analysis of data and such. Now let's just talk about what's happening with the charts for Tesla and the others. I don't really want to focus as much on other stuff. So for Tesla, I just want to say that things are looking bearish right now. We're continuing to sell off. We had a 12% negative day today, and then we're also dropping the after hours. I think there's going to be a big test tomorrow. Now, obviously, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know what the GDP numbers are going to look like, but just know that Tesla looks very bearish on the 4-hour and also on the daily time frame. The daily is also looking especially weak. The daily showing 212 is our 50 EMA. And then simultaneously, if you look at the 4-hour, 212 also happens to align with our 200 EMA. So I think 212 is a very important level for Tesla. We have a confluence of support right there. My guts tells me that depending on the GDP numbers, we could gap up tomorrow, and then we might actually end up testing 212. Either that or we test 212 and then bounce. But I think that 212 is going to be tested, and we're going to be watching to see if we bounce off that or not. If we lose 212, there's going to be a bigger drop. We're easily falling to like 205, 200, even into the 100s. 190s could be coming if we end up losing 212. If we hold it, we could rebound back up to the 220s. So look for a big test tomorrow. I have a feeling we might gap up tomorrow, then continue to dip. Make sure you watch resistance, by the way. So for our levels, we have 215 as support in the 212 area. And then if that fails us, I think we easily come down to 205 or below that. And then for resistance, don't forget to be watching 219, 222, and then 225. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of gap up and then drop down to 212, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. Or if we come straight down to 212, we could try to bounce. But I see a test of 212 coming, and we'll have to see if we get a bounce on Tesla or not. That depends on the GDP numbers and such. But I do see a little bit more downside potential. 212 should be tested, and we're going to be watching to see if we bounce or not. If we don't bounce, Tesla's going to get a bigger rug pull, so just be very careful. How about for SPY? Now, one thing worth noting is that SPY has its 4-hour 200 EMA around just under 542, and then the daily 50 EMA happens to be just at about 542 as well. So there's another confluence on SPY. Now we got a weak close, but during the after hours, during the post market, we're starting to see some buyers defending SPY, trying to get it back above 542. So to be bearish, you need to see a follow through move below 542. SPY is very simple to understand. 542 is a key level. Watch and see how we kind of trade around there. If that fails, look at 540. And that's our last key support. We got to hold 540. If we lose that on SPY, there's a big gap to fill all the way down to 536. If we break past 542, look for an attempt for 544, and we'll see how things go. My guts tells me we might gap up and retest 544. That's where we have this imbalance. 544 might be tested, and then if we reject, we're coming all the way back down to 540. If we hold it, we could try to rebound. It depends on the GDP numbers. I think we might gap up and possibly reject, but then watch 540 for confirmation. If that fails, I think there's going to be a big rug pull, guys, so just be very careful. Watch for confirmation. And then let me go over something that kind of scares me a little bit. When you look at ES, okay, ES has this big gap to fill all the way down to 54.40. So this might kind of like push up tomorrow and start dipping back down if we lose our 50 EMA. If that fails, there's going to be a big gap fill, and that can actually drag SPY lower. For SPX, we're currently losing the 50 EMA, and we have this gap to fill all the way down here. So if we end up losing the 54.10 area, if that breaks, I think that we could easily start dipping all the way down towards the gap fill, which would take us down towards the 53.80 area, maybe a little bit below that. That's going to lead to more downside for SPY, and there is a risk of that looking at SPX. So ES and SPX are favoring downside right now. We'll see how the GDP numbers affect us if we get a little temporary bounce or not, but as of right now, the charts look more bearish. For Nvda, it's very simple. When you look at the 4-hour time frame, I'm going to show you guys something very interesting. Okay, we have this support right here at 114. If that fails, we have a gap to fill down to 110. It's a little tiny, but you guys can see it if I zoom in a little bit. There's this gap over here where my cursor is, all the way down to 110. If we lose 114 tomorrow, look for that gap fill. If we break past 115, look for 118, 117, excuse me, as resistance. I think we're going to gap up tomorrow, but I do see a risk of us dipping down to 110 eventually. So I'm a little bit nervous considering that there is a downtrend right here that's forming. So this is kind of favoring a gap up and then a dip all the way down to this 110 area. For Bitcoin, we're looking a little bit more bearish. If we lose 65,500, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down to this imbalance, which was the 64,000 area. This chart is favoring downside, but we need confirmation. A break of 65,500 would give us that, and that's going to lead to more selling. For NQ, it looks bearish, straight up just bearish. Okay, there's no sign of a bounce. I see some interest right here at 19,125. That's where we have previous resistance becoming support. We'll see if it rebounds a little bit to get close to about 19,350. It might rebound in the morning, but then watch to see if we get a rejection to fall lower. The trend is still bearish. QQQ is also looking more bearish in my opinion. There's a bit of a downtrend right here. I'll be watching some of these very, very key levels. We basically have 462 as key support, and we have resistance around 465, very close to that range. If we lose 462 tomorrow, look for basically 460. If that fails us, we could be tipping all the way down closer to under 458. And we have 466 as resistance. If that breaks, look for 468. I think tomorrow we gap up most likely, but then we'll have to see if we can try to get back above 468 or not. If we fail to do so, there could be another rejection and continuation lower, as lots of futures are looking very weak, and so is the trend on the NASDAQ and the QQQ. If we look at the daily chart, we also look a little bit more bearish to me. So this is favoring a move to the downside. It still favors downside. Maybe we gap up and then continue. So just be very, very careful. This is a very, very important area of interest for 60. That's where we have previous resistance. That might be tested tomorrow, so just be very careful. So for Apple, we look bearish on the daily time frame. Make sure you watch support around this 217 range. If we lose that, we're coming all the way down to about 215, then 212. If we hold and break past 218, look for 220. My gut is telling me this might actually gap up tomorrow as well, and then maybe continue lower. The chart still looks bearish, so 215 looks imminent. That's it for the main ones I typically go over. Just know that Tesla looks bearish. We're going to dip a little bit more, I think, to at least 212 and watch to see if we get a bounce depending on the GDP numbers and other factors. But that's going to be very important. There's also this gap fill, which is very close to 211. So it's very close to that 212 range. So watch that very carefully. I think Tesla may dip a little bit more, then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For a few more, we also have Palantir. The daily looks very bearish as we have this imbalance to fill. I think we're easily coming down to 26 when looking at these current technicals. When I pull up the 4-hour time frame, it's also looking more bearish. I think that 25.39 is another area. So 26 and 25.39 are 200 EMA are going to be tested. So watch those two supports very, very carefully. I do see those being tested. So with that being said, there is a risk of downside for Palantir. Looking at Supermicro, I'm seeing the same thing. I think we might be testing 700. If that breaks, we're coming all the way down to about 680. I think we might retest this resistance around 716, maybe a little bit below that. Then we could start dipping lower all the way down to about 680. So watch for that very carefully. For Rivian, we're looking a little bit more bearish as we're losing our 50 EMA. I think that this imbalance over here might get filled, taking us all the way down towards 16 flats. So if that fills us, like I said before, 15.5 is likely coming. So I see a little bit of a downtrend on Rivian. Tesla contributes to this. We had this high up here around 18.8. Since then, we've been downtrending ever since the big deal was made for the big investments. But in my personal opinion, we look more bearish and there's a risk of more downside. So with that being said, I see a risk of downside. I think that we might be dipping lower. So watch to see if we continue all the way down towards the lower, the 15.8 area or below that. But I favor downside for Rivian. Might retest 16.25, then continue from there. For SoFi, we look more bearish. We need to break past 7.4 to turn bullish, but that's looking less likely. It looks like it wants to be testing 7 flat or 200 EMA. If that breaks, we have this gap to fill all the way down to 6.8. So I favor 7 and 6.8. It looks more bearish to me. For the IWM Russell 2000, we have 219.64 as resistance, and we have support at 215.75. So I think closer to 216 might be tested. If we lose that, there's a big gap to fill down to 213. If we hold this, we could rebound. My gut tells me we might pop and drop and start dipping lower towards 216. If that breaks, we have this gap to fill, so watch for that very carefully. For AMD, okay, AMD in my opinion is looking bearish. There's a very, very big downtrend right over here. If we continue to fall, I'll be looking at this key support all the way down here towards 141. And we have this resistance all the way up here towards 148. So I favor the downside a little bit more. I think there's a good chance we continue to fall. So this might be dipping all the way down to about 141. For ARM, we're also dipping a little bit. The 4 hour is looking a little bit more bearish. Make sure you look at resistance around 160. If we lose this, we'll be dipping down to this imbalance towards 154. My gut is telling me that there's a downtrend on ARM. We have this high up here towards 188. We're making lower highs, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. So I think it might be testing our 200 EMA, get very close to 154, if not 152.5. Looks a little bit more bearish. Could we gap up tomorrow, then continue lower? Yes, but it still favors downside. It's still looking kind of weak to me. For Coinbase, we're at key support at 243.68. If it holds this, we're going to be going back up to 252. If we lose this, we're going to be dipping all the way down to at least 236. I think it might rebound a bit, but we'll have to be watching to see if we end up turning back down. I'm not 100% sure if 243 holds. If it fails, Coinbase is going to get a rug pull, so watch for that for confirmation. Amazon is looking kind of weak because there's a head and shoulders like structure that's developing. If 180 breaks, we're going all the way down to 174. So this is looking very bearish to me. We'll see for confirmation. Maybe we rebound tomorrow towards 183, and we'll see if it rejects or not. If we get a rejection, lose 180, look for a bigger dip to 174. So watch for that very, very carefully. For Meta's looking a little bit bearish. We have this high here. We're making lower highs and lower lows. If we end up losing support down here towards 461, we'll be dipping all the way down towards 454. And in order to turn back up, we want to break past 470. My guts tells me that we're going to be looking for a test of 460 and 454. And this favors downside, so I think that's looking a little bit more probable to me. For Microsoft, we're looking a little bit more bearish as well. Look at the structure. There's no sign of a bounce. We have this high here. We had a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and lower low. Generally, when you have wicks like this, we do like to fill them. So I think we might be looking for a dip to 425 soon. Now, we could rebound first to 432. If we don't break through that, then I think that we might reject and come back down to 425. So rebound in a dip is looking more probable. We look more bearish. There's no sign of a true bounce just yet. Google just had earnings yesterday. It's actually rejecting. We failed to get past 190, only to reject back down. We lost our 50 or 200 EMA. That's a bad sign. So I'm seeing a risk of this dipping even lower. I think the full measurement move would take this all the way down to about 170. Look for a retest of 176 and see if we reject to come down to 170. For GameStop, we're kind of rejecting. Make sure you look at support all the way down to 24.21. I think that, I'm sorry, because we broke 24.21, excuse me, guys, we actually broke this in the after hours. We're easily coming down to this imbalance towards 23. So I do see 23 coming for GameStop. To me, this is looking more bearish, and I just wanted to give you guys a warning about that. For AMC, we're also looking more bearish. We have this nice imbalance to fill down here towards 4.4. I favor downside for this as well. If we break past 4.85, we could rebound, but this is favoring 4.4, so be very careful with that. DJT is rejecting. I think we're going to be looking for a test of 30 if that holds or not. If that breaks, we'll be looking for 28.5. That's looking more probable to me. Downside is looking more imminent. For the VIX, we're trying to break up right here. My concern, though, is the fact that 18 is a tough resistance. So I think that the VIX could possibly get a little dip. Maybe the market rebounds a bit tomorrow. But then if we get a bounce off the previous resistance becoming support at 17 and the VIX continues to go, that could lead to more downside. It's kind of similar to this right here, how the VIX kind of like broke out towards 17, came down a bit, then continued higher. We'll be watching to see if the VIX is about to do the same thing to retest previous resistance becoming support. And if that's the case, then we could continue to go higher, and that could actually lead to more downside for the S&P 500. For the 10-year treasury yield, we're kind of rejecting here. Make sure you look at resistance towards 4.33. We also have this big gap to fill all the way down here towards 4.19. Overall, be very careful with the 10-year. The 10-year is trying to show some life, and if it continues from here, I think that there is, once again, more potential for us to push all the way up towards our 200 EMA for 4.33. That is, once again, favoring downside for the markets. The dollar has an interesting setup. So we haven't broken out yet, but one thing worth noting is that the dollar has an inverse head and shoulders. We have a left shoulder here. We have a head and then a right shoulder. If this plays out and the dollar starts breaking out, we have to watch 104.5 as resistance. If it breaks that, look for 104.8. If we get a breakout on the dollar, this is going to cause more downside for the markets. I think that SPY will fill the 436 gap. This could even drag Tesla lower. So you want to be very, very careful, guys. There is a risk of downside looking at the way the dollar is looking. So that being said, guys, Tesla may dip a little bit more. I think 212 could be tested. We'll see if we get a bounce off that or not. We'll see what happens with the GDP numbers. I think the odds favor a gap up in the markets, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get if we gap up and then drop, or if we gap up and go. It depends on the GDP numbers. I'll talk more about that tomorrow morning before the market opens. But just know the overall trend for SPY, SPX, ES, a bunch of others out there, they're looking more bearish. Okay, they're looking more bearish right now. Even Tesla's favoring downside. So be careful as you approach some key supports, and I'll see you guys tomorrow before the market opens. Thank you all so much for listening. Enjoy your night, your day, your evening, wherever you are around the world, and I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow before the market ends up opening. Thank you and peace out.